Welcome to Off the Cuff with Sean Hancock. In this episode, we dive deep into the life of a husband, father, friend, and real estate investor. Join us as we explore the fascinating journey of an individual who made an astonishing $1 million in real estate investments in 2021 and is just getting started. Together, we'll discuss goal setting, problem solving, and the path to becoming investment literate. But that's not all. We'll also delve into the realms of stewardship, fatherhood, and mastering the art of getting things done, all while being there for your family. Stay tuned for candid conversations and valuable insights as we take life and real estate investment off the cuff with me, Sean Hancock. Welcome back to Off the Cuff with me, Sean Hancock, and I'm super excited to introduce to you our guest, Luke Gilbert. Luke, thanks so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
So Luke and I, kind of a fun story how we met. You actually were neighbors with my brother.
Yep.
And before you started getting into real estate, you were an electrician, and you were at this brink, and I know a lot of our guests have felt this way, where you've had like a job or a thing where you're like, this isn't quite what I'm made for. This isn't quite what I'm purposed for. Like you were doing it, but correct me if I'm wrong. There was an itch in you. There was something. There was like I want more in my life. I want more in my relationship. I just want more.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I met you. Is like right before you entered into more.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Absolutely. I was telling the story of my mom today. She was asking what show I was going to be on, and I was describing you as like that brother I bumped into, you know? And I was actually transitioning. I was already in that transition into real estate, but I didn't know how to do it, so I was leaning back on my construction background. And your brother put me in touch with you because you were at a very similar point, right? I mean, you were taking on brick and mortar comedy project, which nobody does anymore, and it had a lot of risk associated to it. So,
right. And then COVID happened.
Yeah, totally, exactly. So you actually hired me, or we had a preliminary conversation about doing electrical work to create the sound stage and the lit stage at your venue, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm heading down to Connecticut. I won't be back until 2 weeks from today. How about we catch up then? And you were like, great. And then I sit down on the airplane next to two strangers, and we start talking about books and God and family, only to find out in like just before we landed that I was the electrician that you were going to hire to do your project. It was one of those God pushing us into a room
and we had
together.
Just been on the phone with each other.
Right. And no commitments at that point yet either. I think it was just one of those, wow, at that point it was set in stone. I was going to build your project, and we were going to be friends for a while.
Wild.
And this is like 6 years later.
Yeah.
Should I point that out? I mean, I was in that transition of wanting more out of life, to your point. I mean, realizing that there was more, I think is a better way for me to put it. I kind of read a few books, and my family was growing. I had escaped California with my wife and two kids, and in Idaho, where it was almost like a clean slate, and was just realizing that there was more. And then when you realize that there's more, God forbid you don't go try to get it. That's how I was feeling. It's like, if the things I'm reading are true and a guy like me is capable of more, then I have a requirement, a spiritual requirement to grow. And that was that was part of my transition. I'm like, I want a bigger life. I want a bigger family. I want an infinite runway, and I think for me, the real estate industry was that. And then the transition was the painful growth environment, the rebirth, so to speak. And you and I were working together during that. It was kind of awesome. And to call you out as well, I mean, you were going through a very similar, you didn't have kids yet. You were taking like a last hurrah project as an individual artist, trying to make his mark before kids showed you the world, That's how I remember you, at least.
I remember you saying, I can't wait to have a meetup with you like after you have kids, because something changes in your life as a human being once you have a child, and the world changes, where you're like, oh my gosh, not only do I need to care for this kid, but I've got to be the guide to get them to be successful and cared for and protected in a wild, wild world.
Right.
So,
but even like to spin that, it's like, I have to be more. That's what my kids really required of me, is like, I'm not enough. Like, and that we could spin that in a negative connotation, but the sunny side of that is a growth opportunity. And like, my whole life, every child that's come into this world has required more of me. And then you just realize there's more. Like, it's the infinite cycle of like, oh my gosh, how could we possibly? That's how everybody approaches parenting. Like, well, good thing we've been planning for this, or, oh my God, we haven't been planning for this. And I'm from 7 kids, right? My dad will tell you, you give 110% if it's 1 kid or if it's 7 kids. You just happen to end up getting a bigger bucket over time. Like, I got my 4th child on the way right now. And I'm like, what I'm learning from my 3rd child is, there's always more in the tank. Like, I am always capable of more. And if those things are true, live big, man.
That's good, man. It's a lot like love. You can't run out of it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%.
We sometimes feel like I can't, like, my bandwidth can only take so much. My capacity is only so much.
Right.
Unless you're at the brink of your capacity expanding.
Right.
Right. And love,
which is a decision too. I mean, it's up to you. You can be at a brink of a capacity expansion or a retraction. It's up to you. Like, there's growth and there's atrophy. Pick a side of that coin, because you're going in one direction or the other. But yeah, I mean, there is no such thing as your capacity. It's a scarcity mindset that brings us to that conclusion. And then the reality is, well, my wife and I decided to bring more kids in the world because we had decided to commit to abundance, and the commitment to abundance had created abundance. And then I'm sitting there looking at the achievements, and I'm like, this can't be for me. Yeah, there's no way this can be for me. And then by committing to the service at home, my wife looked at me. I was on fire in 2021, basically almost divorced because my professional career was taking so much of my energy. And I told my friend I was going to commit to my home life. I was going to 10x my home life, is what I said. And then I spent June there was a rules to the game, and it was anytime my wife asked me to come home, I did. And anytime I didn't have something to do, rather than make something to do, I would go home. And 2.5 weeks into that, my wife looked at me, and this is after like needing to repair our relationship, really. And she said, I think we should have another kid. And it was like, I think she was expecting me to say no. You know, she was expecting me to talk her off the ledge. And I said, of course, let's go. You know, at the end of the day, if you're going to commit to abundance, it's abundance in all areas. Yeah. And that's that idea of like, you don't have a capacity. I don't have a capacity. All there is the infinite runway. And with that, it becomes more about energy management maybe, and more about, you know, a holistic view of the self and the areas in which you're weakest can use energy to improve. But man, it's like I'm course correcting on a daily basis with the horizon in mind, not necessarily a destination.
Luke, that is so good. I just want to highlight this idea, this concept of like, when we as husbands or fathers or men, human beings that are trying to put our nose to the grindstone, if you will, and just work hard, we end up, if we put our heads up, we might be seeing that we've been sacrificing not having that quality time with those that we really, really care about. So you literally said, you know what, I'm going to put something else first. I'm going to up my family life and my priority. And by doing so, in this abundance mindset, did your business end up taking a decline, or because you decided to elevate your spouse and your family life, did everything grow with you?
I mean, yes to both. I would say when you change focus, the thing you were focused on will take will deteriorate to some degree. And it's almost like you're asked to sacrifice one for the other to some degree. And for me, what I've learned is get your priorities straight, and then you don't suffer. And so to have your family or your wife or some component of your personal life below your professional life is a mistake a lot of people make. You've probably heard me say it. I say it all the time. The idea that being a good father makes you a good husband is out of order. To be a good husband, you then have the opportunity to be a good father. And like learning to organize those things, none of it suffers really. At the same time, like I my business did cool down for a bit, but I've never not had what I need. Like, that's part of the abundance commitment is nothing's going to go away that belongs in your life.
Yeah.
And some things, being overworked is a status symbol for some folks, and being busy as a status symbol is another thing. And like, that they're incorrect priorities. So I'm still feeling wildly successful. It's just a matter of what does success look like for you, because money only solves so many problems, and the reality is that's a bucket with a hole in it. You cannot have enough of that. Depending on if you choose to focus on it, there'll never be enough. So having your priorities in order was something I had to learn during that. But it was this assignment of, don't lose at home. Like, okay, I'm losing at home. First, the pain shows up, and then you're either going to do something about it or you're going to blame it on your wife, right? And then the reality was I had nowhere to hide because I was the problem. And then time management and prioritization became a focus of mine, which has got me to where I am today, which is, thriving in a down economy in one of the most fragile or most targeted asset classes, which is housing. So I truly attribute it to a spiritual focus over a professional focus, and a home focus over a work focus. And you can't just let something die in the desert and expect to harvest from it. So I would identify as a workaholic, but that's also that knowing where work is on my priorities makes decision making easier.
That's so good, man. You've mentioned the word abundance multiple times, abundantly, in this conversation. And I can't help, one of my favorite verses in the book, in the Bible, is John 10:10. And it's the thief comes only to kill, steal, and destroy. And this is Jesus talking. And Jesus says, but I've come so you may have life and have it in abundance. Like, having abundance is having so much that you can give it away, or having so much that you can share it with other people. And I know, like, being friends with you, hanging out with you, hearing abundance so much is that you have plenty. You have more than enough, whether it's time, whether it's power, resources to share, to give, to support other people, whether it's your kids, your family, or it's your work life, right?
Sure.
So, taking that concept, I want to talk a little bit about wealth creation and like generational wealth creation. These are some topics that you and I have talked about, and how important is it to leave or to empower your kids with wealth, and what have you learned with real estate that someone who's watching this is like, dude, I'm scared of real estate. I don't know nothing about it. We're in this time, this frame of illiteracy when it comes to real estate. I'm not the entire country, right, but a lot of the country is in this illiteracy with real estate, with wealth investment. What have you learned?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's even more systemic in a misunderstanding of money than it is real estate. And real estate in relationship to money is one relationship that real estate has, because one of the reasons I love the asset class is it has a utility, and you can live in it, and somebody else can live in your investment. So a real estate as an investment opportunity has money as a component and wealth creation as a component. But your first question was, how important is legacy wealth creation? Well, how important is it to you? Because it's not important if it's not important. And I can't say that it's important. I can't be like, hey guys, this is important, don't miss it. It's important for me. And why is that? Well, I want to be, we're Ed Milet people. I mean, I want to be the one. I intend to be a force multiplier in my family. And I think the misdirection around money and the misunderstanding of wealth creation is it deteriorates over generations, right? You can have a successful member that then the misunderstanding of how to steward wealth can deteriorate quickly, so to be a force multiplier in that is one of my intentions. But it comes down to having worked very hard with very small financial results and realizing that either I'm in a system that is not designed for my success, or I am playing it safe. And I think it was probably both. And then, why real estate? Well, real estate is probably the best way to generate wealth once you have your hands around it, and that's multifaceted. But I'm in it because, well, first of all, I can control it. The assets are tangible. They're made of valuable material. They have a utility, and they're a leveraged investment, which, that we could break any one of those things down and spend an entire hour talking about it. But real estate as an investment opportunity just became a passion of mine. I was in construction prior to sales, and I think it was, you fall in love with building houses, only you're not making any money as a tradesman, and then you go, well, shoot, the guy selling the house is making all the money. Let me go try that. And most people aren't willing to bridge that gap, because it's easy to down talk the man who's making the transaction happen, because you feel like they haven't done anything. You've done all the work. But what I found is most tradesmen are not willing to put on a shirt and tie and go do that work. And it is playing it safe to stay dirty in the dark, So it was just a natural progression for me of, all right, I don't want to abandon the work I've done to get to the, what I would consider a prominent player in the trades. So what can I do to take that next level with a wealth intention, rather than just become a master electrician? Like, okay, that could have been a path, but the ceiling on that is predictable. You could literally Google what a master electrician makes nationally, and there's a pretty hard ceiling on your ability to overcome that income bracket. So it was, hey, let's take this jump, and natural progression, really. That's why real estate.
Yeah. So when it comes to rules that govern you,
sure.
What would you say are some of your pillars? What are some of your standards to live by in order to be a man of success, a good husband, a good father, and someone who is fostering the importance of generational wealth?
Interesting. That's a tough question. And I think I have a visceral reaction to the word rules, so I'm going to reframe that as principles. Nice. I think, to quote Stephen Covey, it's about having correct principles, and principles boil down to axioms like do this and success happens. And we know that from the feeling you get. I mean, priorities. We talked about priorities, having my priorities in order, time management. I don't know that I have any of these things mastered, but what I've come to the if you boil it down to one, it becomes focus on the relationship. I mean, what I've found is that by being in community with the people around me, which, sometimes has its challenges as a professional, first and foremost, I'm serving my client base, but really with the intention of lifelong relationships. And if I can help you create wealth, and I can help you create wealth, the outcome of that is my own wealth. And so the largest river flows below all other rivers, because water flows down to that source. So getting underneath other people and helping pick them up has been wildly instrumental in the success of my real estate business. And it comes down to strong service. I mean, it's a very Christian subset, be in service to others. And just the relationship component of it has been a main focus of mine, is get to know the people you work with and become wildly important to their success, and you will be successful.
Yeah. Inheritance is a funny thing, and as you were just talking about biblical principles or Christian mindset, I'm reminded of this verse that says that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, right? And my dad gave me his pickup truck. His 93 pickup truck was his work truck.
Nice.
I'm driving around in that thing, and it's just filled with memories, like windshield times that I've had with my dad. Going on a date with a girl in high school. My brother's driving the truck. Just the memories that I've had in this truck, and the hauls, and all that kind of stuff. And my son is in the back of like the back seat. I'm driving him around, and he loves this truck. If I'm ever driving in this 93 Chevy pickup truck, my son wants to go with me in it.
So cool.
And I'm just reminded of like, this is a pickup truck that I get to steward and take care of. And I might someday, this might become my son's pickup truck. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So this is a simple inheritance in a way of like, I was given this thing to take care of and foster, and I could give it to my son one day. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And this is a truck. When you take investment, or you take property, or you take real estate, it becomes another multiplier of the simple concept of stewarding the good things that we have, the little things. And then also pouring into my son and telling stories of the truck or whatever, you know what I mean? It causes in his mind, this is a special thing.
Yeah.
And it's something that when he'll grow, when he has the opportunity to like sit at the wheel when he's old enough to learn how to drive stick, all of those memories are going to be part of him too. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. So anyways, I just share that story just to simplify the idea of inheritance, you know, of taking care of something for generations to come. And I didn't realize this, but as the son of my father, I get to be a part of his inheritance, part of his goodness in a way, because he taught me how to drive the truck. He taught me how to take care of things. Like I'm not a mechanic like he was, but I know how to call a mechanic when a light comes on. You know what I'm saying?
Get the phone. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a wild thing. You're talking about community. How I get to be a part of it, of my father's own inheritance by stewarding the principles that he's given to me, so that I can pass them on to my son.
Yeah, and I like the concept that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
That's right.
The reality is, I intend to steward a massive amount. I intend to achieve and steward a massive amount of wealth. You know, that bringing it back to my son told me the other day that his goal is to buy a house when he's 12 years old.
Oh my gosh!
And a lot of that comes down to like, he sees me setting these aggressive goals and chasing it. So it's like the holistic experience of fatherhood is you need to be bigger and better and share your journey with your children. You know, we talk openly about money in my family. My son asks me how much things are worth. I tell him I'm not trying to shelter him from what we've built together as a family, because without my family, I wouldn't have any of this. Yeah. So it's ours, and you really got to build the relationship of stewardship early. I mean, I can't imagine my kids end up in the same line of profession as me, because that's just unusual. But I intend to help them understand how to manage what we create together, you know. And wealth creation and generational wealth, it's like you got a truck, right? And a truck for some is a big deal, for others isn't. That spectrum exists at any level. So you could be fortunate enough to inherit actual money, and then your responsibility is to invest that money correctly. And I find so many people are ashamed of inheritance, and so many people take inheritance and squander it to say they didn't have it. And like, everybody wants to be self-made. There's no such thing. And the reality is, be proud of what you have, and then on top of which, be a good steward of simple things like trucks and complicated things like real estate portfolios, you know. And I want every one of our listeners to take an inventory of where they're trying to get, because if you don't have a destination in mind, you're just going to wander around in the woods for the rest of your life, only to arrive nowhere. And you don't have to know where you're going to set a destination. You know, the reality is, we all should set bigger goals, and we all should expect more of ourselves, and, you know, find out, you know, you asked me the rules, so I flipped it to principles. What are your principles? You know, they don't have to be right, but by stating them, you could look at them, study them, decide you got the wrong ones, take a few out, put a few new ones in. I know for me, it's been a failing forward experience my entire life, but also I have through that iterative process, I've come to some conclusions and put some things in place that have channeled success, you know? So you know you're doing it right when success shows up. You know you're doing it wrong when you're in pain. And if those two things are true, where are you? If you're in pain, look at your priorities and look at how your schedule reflects them. And if you're in success, look at your goals. And, it's what feels like success for me today would have been unachievable to a lesser version of me. And then also, like, I've been through some wild successes. So even big goals, even what would have been a big goal is now, I wouldn't even come up in conversation because, I want a national presence as a management company. I want a national presence as a sales team. And I want, at least 300 doors, all those things sound insane and to some even greedy. But I'm like, what it really is if there's no limit to your capacity, your goal's not big enough. Already, I could tell you your goal's not big enough. Your goal's probably not big enough. And then, it is not greed to achieve the best, highest version of yourself. It's actually a spiritual requirement. And if that's true, are you focused on your spirit and being the largest version of yourself?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Luke, what I'm hearing you say is, if we're honest with ourselves, we all were made for more. If we're honest with ourselves, we might be dreaming too small. We might be setting too small of goals. We might need to set goals so big that it might take the hand of God to help us achieve them. Is that right, what I'm hearing from you?
Well, think about it. I like the way you framed it at the end there. It's like, if you can do it alone, God doesn't need to be there with you. And so your goal has nothing to do with spirituality. And I think all of us could be, yes, we could all be more. And it doesn't have to be from a selfish place. It has to be from I want to fulfill the highest version of myself because God hasn't created me for mid-level activity. I'm here for more than that. And by thinking about those beautiful, far-off destinations, I have to rethink the way that I do things. I have to redesign my business strategy. I have to think about who I am and what my spirit can carry, and then grow those components of myself for the journey. But it is only with that far-off destination that any of that even matters.
Right.
And then I have to lean back into God because I can't do it alone. You can't help me. There's nobody around me that could do it for me. And then it becomes about my relationship with God. And my strong spirit allows me to overcome the failure that it takes to get there. If you fail and quit, it's because your spirit's weak. It's not because you're not capable of it. It's because you're not willing to bash into the obstacle in order to break it. It's like either you break or the obstacle breaks. And that's a spiritual equation.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of people that are in that I know don't have a really healthy understanding of wealth creation. In fact, I grew up almost feeling like rich people or wealthy people were bad in some way, shape, or form, like as if wealth corrupted you, kind of a thing. And I think it's that kind of concept is something that I've had to reframe so that I have a healthy understanding of wealth management, of multi-generational wealth creation, and the difference even between poverty, riches, and wealth. You know what I'm saying? I grew up and even was on the mission field thinking that I needed to have nothing and surrender nothing. And then I discovered that when you have more, you can give more, and that more can work for you to help benefit other people, right?
1,000%.
Yeah. So a person who is listening to this, and maybe they have an unhealthy relationship with wealth creation, and I want you to think about you're where you're at now, or even let's say you're in a conversation with you in 10 years and you 10 years ago, and you're at the table with the three of them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And in 2020, you made your first million. Is that right?
2021.
So the person 10 years ago is like, what?
Yeah.
To think of the idea of making that might be mind-blowing.
I wouldn't believe it, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the person, you 10 years from now, is like, bro, you're not even touching the tip of the iceberg, baby.
Yeah.
Right. What do you feel like your 10-year down the road version might say to encourage you and encourage the other guy? But if you wouldn't mind,
right,
would you mind sharing into the camera what you feel like you might be hearing?
Sure, and I guess it's challenging to imagine myself 10 years from now, but I think there is no arrival. I mean, that's the most important part. You don't come to an understanding of money. It's like your understanding in your relationship with God. You have to continuously ponder it. And because of that, you focus on those things and they improve, right? So my relationship with God is open and honest, and it cycles through growth and atrophy. And at the end of the day, it's my commitment to focus on it which creates the improvement. Or, the better I can come to deeper conclusions about God and my relationship with Him only through the constant focus on that relationship. Your relationship with money is very similar, and there's a ton of negative stuff around it. Nothing in this world is good or bad. We frame it one way or the other, and then why would you try to demonize money? Well, you don't want to have to take the time to understand it. I mean, I've had people very close to me say, well, I wish I understood money. I'm like, you can't. Okay. Wishing is not the same thing as implementing a strategy. I mean, there's plenty of information out there. So, the 10-year version of me has a deeper understanding of, why stewardship of wealth and wealth creation is so important. I know that it is now. Deep inside, I have that desire, and I attribute that to a spiritual understanding of the good that I can do with more resources. But then also, you can't set it and forget it. I mean, there is no moment of arrival in this life. And if that's true, the things you focus on, it's like are the muscles you choose to exercise. And if you don't care for money, money doesn't care for you. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just like, if you're watching this and you're going, well, shoot, how do I make $1 million? How do you make $1 million? Because I could show you how I did it, and it still might not get you there, because your container needs to grow to hold the money that you will then create. And I've seen people come into $1 million and that money's gone. And how does that happen? Well, you didn't grow your container. You accidentally bumped into wealth. And if wealth doesn't, if you don't know how to flirt with wealth and then take it on a date and then talk it into marrying you, at the end of the day, you're just going to be constantly alone. So I think that's the best I can do for the 10-year version of myself. I think the 10-year-ago version of myself would have called it hocus pocus, would have told me that a spiritual focus is a waste of time because organized religion is demonic. There's 100 catchphrases that I would have thrown at myself. But what I've learned is you have to prioritize your relationship with God. That is not within the constraints of a religious organization. It's about you and the entity. And focus there first, and then the reality is you may become strong enough to believe in yourself and create wealth, and then by focusing on your relationship with money somewhere down your priority list, you will be able to maintain some level of financial capacity that you couldn't achieve without, first of all, God on your team, second of all, belief in yourself, and then third of all, some proficiency with the ethereal element of wealth.
Luke, I gotta say, I feel like our time together, whenever I'm hanging out with you, you allow yourself to just get wrung out of all the things that you've learned, that you want to share, that you want to help other people. You're a true problem solver. You show up with heart and kindness and this like raw authenticity of like, this is who I am. This is what I'm processing and working through. And you're willing to get to places, even though like you may bump along the way and be willing to fail. You have this willingness to get back up, dust yourself off, share with other people what you learned along the way, so to save them, if you could, from failing where you did, so you can fast track them to get where you are.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that last piece too, because especially the industry I'm in, and I'm with Keller Williams, which is a very rich culture. At the end of the day, it's like, I can't learn from your mistakes. What I can do is take your perspective and maybe see something coming on the horizon, because I think a lot of people are trying to fast track wealth and a lot of people are trying to emulate wealth. And I'm not saying no to those things. I'm just like, there's no easy button. Yeah. Like you can't wormhole your way into, like, that's the growing your container piece, which is, you know, the scars you carry to the finish line are the lesson. And like, I think that's what it's come down to. Well, why am I so willing to fail? Well, what I've found is when you can focus on the opportunity in the failure, the more often you fail, the more opportunity you find. And there is not a lesson, like the path that got me here is the path that got me here. So 10-year version of myself wouldn't say you're doing it wrong. He'd say, here's what I learned. And then I know the younger version of myself was not going to listen to me, right? Like, I don't listen to anybody around me. I go bump into it and learn, you know, but it's that commitment to God's got my back, right? At the end of the day, failure is only failure if you frame it that way. And I've learned to look at failure differently. I mean, I'm building business is all about failure. Building wealth is also that way.
That's good.
And it's really like, okay, there's that guy who made $1 million and then lost $1 million. And now he's going to play it completely safe because he's like, it's not safe to try to make $1 million. Whereas instead, he could look at it as he just learned $1 million lesson, right? What he learned there, most people don't even get to touch. He had to learn about himself in that environment. He had to learn about his relationship with God in that environment. He had to learn about money in that environment. And should he treat it as the most valuable lesson he's ever learned, he's going to get to $1 million quicker than I am. And that's that moment of like, is there such thing as failure, Sean? I haven't seen it. I've seen wild lessons, and some of my darkest holes have actually made the light much more apparent.
Yeah. I never lose, I win or I learn.
Amen. Nelson Mandela, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly it.
Yep.
It takes significant spiritual fortitude to look into the face of adversity and see the lesson.
That's so good. Luke, if someone wants to learn more from you or get some of your wisdom, you have your own YouTube channel. We'll put the description in the link, but would you mind sharing with them where they could find more of you?
Yeah. Well, shoot, I try to be all over the place. I'm getting focused in YouTube right now. I don't know if it's this type of conversation that's happening there. This is my favorite conversation to have. But ultimately, I'm focused on the Treasure Valley real estate in that area and being a very local member, because real estate's very local. Another reason I love it is it's a community event. So we're 18 videos into what's going to be hopefully a multi-year project of building content that helps people make smart decisions around wealth creation and also real estate in the Treasure Valley here. We're at YouTube at Open House Boise, and man, that's been a fail-forward project for me too. I woke up one day knowing I needed to do it, and I wasn't sure why, and I started building videos. So if you don't love what you see today, bear with me. You're going to get to watch my progression as a content creator in that space, and I think it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there in the way that you do, you know, just getting up on stage, unscripted and ready to rumble, knowing that your spirit and your focus on preparedness is the only tool you have in the improv environment. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right.
Life is that way. If you're willing to study and you're willing to pray, you're unstoppable.
Yeah, amen to that. Guys, this is the off-the-cuff kind of mentality. And you know, when you are falling forward, or failing forward, you're not actually failing, especially if you don't frame it in that way where you can never lose, you win, or you learn. So, Luke, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's been my pleasure.
We could have talked for hours.
Let's do that. Let's get off this and go have a conversation. I love you, man. Nice to be here.
Bro. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.